Hello again. So, last Sunday I asked for feedback about this period. I got nothing. Okay. What's that? Okay. Okay, well, then I brought it back up Wednesday, and I got a lot. So, well, relatively a lot, not tons, but the thing was, it wasn't all in agreement. So, in various points, not just what we study, but also whether we were going to start over. So I tried to do my best to take a little bit of all of it and see what we could come up with. So I initially intended to not start over, but I decided that we would start over after hearing some of your thoughts. But we're also going to be a little bit more selective on who we study, which characters. That's why I put the word "all" in quotation marks, because it's based on a book called All the Men and Women of the Bible, but we're not going to be looking at all of them, not each and every one of them, literally, but several, a lot of them. Some are pretty well known, some are not so well known, but we can still learn things from some of the lesser characters, but our filter is going to be a little bit stronger than maybe it was before, and we won't look at quite as many. Some of the lesser characters we'll leave out. But at any rate, if we're doing alphabetical, which is another thing that we could change up, I don't want to have to pick which ones. So really the only options are either alphabetical or random. And we could try that. I mean, if you wanted to do that, I could come up with all the names and put them in a hat and just draw them out randomly. We could do it that way if you didn't want to do alphabetical. But for now, we're going to start alphabetically, which always means looking at Aaron first. So we're looking at a study of all the men and women of the Bible. And the purpose of any study like this is not only to learn more of the Bible, because the Bible, it's a book about God. It's a book that reveals who God is and what God's purpose is, and the coming of His Son that He sent. But in the midst of all that, it's full of people. I mean, God uses people and always has used people. He created people, and He uses His people and His creation to bring about His will. So any of the people of God, and for that matter, people who are not people of God, we can learn from them. We can relate to them, and we can learn from them. And they're in here for a reason. Even if they're just there for a second, they're there for a reason. So we can learn from these people, especially the more, what we might call main characters. And Aaron was definitely one of those. Aaron, he's probably not given as much credit as he deserves in a lot of ways. I made a handout for this instead of the slides, because I think that'll be more helpful overall. The name Aaron means mountain of strength, or it could mean enlightened. Sometimes the names it's not exactly certain what they mean, and in those instances it will provide what possibly might be. He is a Levite. His father's name was Amram. His mother's name was Jochebed. They're not mentioned too often, at least by name. He married a woman who was the daughter of Amminadab. He had 4 sons, the first 2 of which are very well known, not for the greatest reasons. But Nadab and Abihu were their names. And then he had another son, Eleazar, and Ithamar, the 4th one. But his legacy, I would say, is summed up in Leviticus 8:36. And Aaron did all the things that Jehovah commanded by Moses. There are some things that I think of when I think about Aaron. Now, Aaron was Moses' brother, okay? That's the first thing. Who's Aaron? Aaron's Moses' brother. This kind of is the same as whenever we might talk about Andrew. Who's Andrew? He's Peter's brother. That's who Andrew is. You ask so many people, even back then, maybe, Andrew, who is this? Andrew, I've been here. Oh, that's Peter's brother. And he will always be known as Peter's brother, which probably includes with it some psychological hurdles to get over, maybe. Well, Aaron, we don't know how it would have been at the time, but historically, he's Moses' brother. But he's also Moses' big brother, which may have made it even worse. So keep that in your minds. He is Moses' brother, but he did a whole lot. And a lot of the things that Moses, for various reasons, probably got credit for and does get the credit for. Hollywood's to blame for some of it, okay? Because of the movies that depict the events that are surround them has Moses doing all the stuff, maybe, that Aaron actually did some of. So we'll see a little bit of that. Priesthood is part of his legacy. But we'll also see he was a human being. And that plays out in some of his life, some of the events that surround his life. So Exodus 4:14 is the first time we meet him. Okay? And that is when God is mad at Moses. Well, not mad at Moses. He's annoyed with Moses. And it says, "Then the anger of Jehovah was kindled against Moses, and he said, 'Is there not Aaron your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well.'" This is when Moses was making up excuses to not do what God was commanding him to do. "I can't speak very well. I'm slow of speech and of tongue." And first God said, "Well, who made man's mouth? Who made your mouth? I made your mouth. If I need your mouth to work right, I'll make it work right." He says, "But I don't know." How did he put it? Oh, well, that's when he just said, "Please send somebody else." He was done with excuses. Now he's anybody but me. And this is when God said, "Aaron, don't you have a brother, Aaron?" And we learned something about him. The first thing we learned about Aaron, besides the fact that he was a Levite, as he's called, he's a good speaker. He can speak well. And he is going to be your mouth. So every time we see Moses going in to Pharaoh and speaking to Pharaoh, the things that are said to Pharaoh, Aaron said it to Pharaoh. That's a little piece that is often overlooked because Moses goes in there. Moses is the main prophet. He's the prophet of God, but he has a prophet too. So Moses is God's prophet, and Aaron's Moses' prophet in a way. Literally, Moses speaks for God, Aaron speaks for Moses. So Aaron was sort of a prophet of God too, but he was the one that was to speak for Moses. So Aaron, everything that we read about Moses dealing with, not every little last thing, but a whole lot of what Moses was dealing with, Aaron had to deal with it too. But we don't often think about Aaron having to deal with it. Now, sometimes some of the things that Moses had to deal with was because of Aaron on at least one occasion. But Aaron was a good speaker. And we don't have I kind of think that Moses was probably a pretty decent speaker too. He just didn't want to do the thing that he was being asked to do. But Aaron was going to be asked to do the speaking. And he did it. But the big brother thing also, his whole life, he and Moses, and they had a bigger sister. Aaron was the big brother over his little brother. Miriam was older, but Aaron was the big brother by about 3 years. And, growing up, those young men that have grown up with brothers probably know that there are certain hardships that can come along with growing up with a brother. I was not blessed enough to have those hardships, and I had to deal with sisters, especially one, or she had to deal with me, I guess I should say. But Aaron and Moses would have had that relationship their whole life growing up. Now they're still together, and Aaron's going to have to speak for him. Maybe he rolled his eyes, here I go, having to walk my little brother through his life. Now I've actually got to speak for him. But he did it. So based on what we learned in Exodus 4, Aaron must have been a very powerful speaker as God. I mean, that's a pretty good compliment coming from God. I know that he will. So you'll speak to him, and he'll speak to Pharaoh, and that's the way we're going to do it. So from the very beginning of where we meet Aaron, we learn he was a good speaker. And this is, as we go through the book of Exodus, that's what we find. Your brother Aaron shall tell Pharaoh. And then Aaron spoke all the words that Jehovah had spoken to Moses and did the signs. Now there's one that even I have often overlooked. He did the signs too. Maybe not every one of them, but it seems in front of Pharaoh, Aaron's the one. So Moses just kind of got to play the role that I would have wanted to play. I'm just being honest here. I'll hang back here. I'm with you, but I'll let you take the role, the forefront, and I'll be here for support. Moses seems to have gotten to take that role in the presence of Pharaoh, and Aaron was the one that had to go up there in the hot spot and say, "Let my people go." That is good trivia for almost anybody. Who said to Pharaoh, "Let my people go"? I bet you 99% of people will get that wrong. Because they'll say Moses. Because everybody knows Moses is the one that said that to Pharaoh. But he wasn't. Aaron was the one that went in and told those things to Pharaoh. It came from Moses, which came from God, but Aaron said it to Pharaoh. Aaron's probably the most thing that was his legacy was the high priesthood, because his family was the first that was to serve in the priesthood of God's worship in the Mosaic period. His family, or his lineage, he was the high priest. The Aaronic priesthood. Being a Levite, Aaron, it gets kind of confusing sometimes because we got what's the difference between the Levitical priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood, and why is it called that way? Well, Aaron, the way I kind of look at it is just Aaron was the first. He was the first high priest. He was a Levite, but Aaron and his lineage, it seems maybe God had in mind, even though he knows everything that's going to happen, it would have continued to be like that, but because of events that happened, it wasn't going to be Aaron's family anymore, but just the Levitical tribe in general. Men will be selected. Basically, there were three classes of men in Israel. There were warriors from all 12 tribes, there were workers, and then there were worshipers, to put it in the way that the writer of that book put it. And Aaron and his sons were the first priests. Aaron was the first high priest, and they were types. Aaron is a type of Christ as well, which we'll see maybe at the end. A pretty major type of Christ, and his sons being types of the church. But that was what a lot of people would probably say was his legacy, was the priesthood, because he was the first high priest of Israel. But we don't learn a whole lot from, as far as practical application is concerned, from him being the high priest, or necessarily even from him being the spokesperson for Moses, doing the dirty work that his little brother was too afraid to do. But we do learn a lot sometimes from people's mistakes. We learn from people's mistakes, or do we? You tell me. You can tell me things now. Why do we learn from, how can you learn from somebody's mistake? Okay, you don't want to do what they did. You learn from people's good things because you want to do what they did, and then you learn from people's mistakes because you don't want to do what they did. Well, it's just like you see somebody actually do something. Like, think about, school children in class, and somebody does something, and make a paper airplane and throw it at the teacher. Don't do that. Our kids homeschool. You don't do it either. That's why we didn't even teach them how to make paper airplanes, so they can't do that. But you do that, and that kid gets in trouble. All the other kids know, I'm not going to do that. I'm glad it was them and not me, but now I know I'm not going to do that because I'll see what happens. We learn from people's mistakes because then we can hopefully, like you said, learn and think, okay, I don't want to make the same mistake that person made because I see the consequences. That's really the purpose of every lesson, every application. Remember Nadab and Abihu? Every time somebody got punished for something, that is a lesson. As Paul said, all this is examples. Don't do as they did. Don't do that. So Aaron yes, he was the first high priest. Yes, he was a godly man. He was a righteous man. He was a powerful speaker. He was faithful, but he was also human. Joe?
There was a preacher who once said about the first church that we do what they did, so we'll get what they got.
Yeah.
Which was salvation. I mean, why do you think a different consequence will come from the same behavior?
Yeah. I guess that works both ways, though. We do what they did so we can get what they got. In that case, it's a good thing. But it also works the other way. If you do what some other people did, then you'll also get what they got. So in all points, you do what they did, you get what they got. Whether it's a good thing like salvation, obeying the gospel, or rejecting the gospel for that matter. You do what they did, you'll get what they got. So we learn from it in both directions.
Unlike humans, God never changes, nor does he respect people. So we know what God tells us to do. We know what he's going to do in response to it. Nothing different.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing different for anyone.
Never changes. No matter where you go or when you go, it's always the same. It doesn't work that way on earth. Even from state to state, laws might be different. I'll just give you an example from our perspective. The double pass on the road. When we move, you can't do that in Kentucky, okay? It's technically against the law. You don't pass two people. Our roads are not as straight as yours, so there's probably a reason for that. But when we moved here, I saw it all the time. Like, what in the world is going on? People do this like crazy. You could be going 10 over the speed limit, and you're going to get passed by somebody, and we've seen a 5 pass before. Well, you're in one state. This is the way it is. You go to another state, you got to kind of recheck and say, what is the law, what is not the law? But in spiritual life, in Christ and God, it's always the same consequence, same rules, same everything. And that's the blessing of that, is that no matter where you are, no matter how old you are, no matter anything, God's will never changes for us. Yeah, Dean?
Well, too, that we think that they should learn from other people's mistakes, but we see that most of the time that doesn't happen.
Yep.
And especially with the children of Israel. Remember during the wandering of the 40 years, they kept complaining over and over and over again. They never learned. But yet, some people do, some people just like this being miracles that Jesus did. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
You wonder, why is it?
Yeah.
It's just something that happens. And you think that most of the spiritual, we do learn from mistakes.
Yep. And, we have to keep on ourselves to make sure that we are learning from our mistakes and from other people's mistakes. I think it's probably generally easier to learn from our own mistakes than it is to learn from somebody else's mistakes. Because, and I think the answer to the riddle is self-deceit. I think that's what it is for a lot of times. We deceive ourselves into not learning from mistakes because we think, we justify like, well, that won't happen to me. Happen to them, but what are the odds, that it would happen to me? And then next thing you know, you do whatever they did, and now look, and now it's too, hopefully you'll still have a chance to learn later, but as far as that particular instance, it's too late, instead of learning from others' mistakes. Well, with Aaron, there's so much good to be said, but being human, we learn on a couple of occasions, especially one occasion, we learn, I'll put it this way, we see why God sort of leapfrogged Aaron and went for Moses. Not that Aaron was even in the running or consideration, but, we learn, take Jacob and Esau, for instance. You don't have to read too much of Genesis in the section of Jacob and Esau to know why Jacob, even though he wasn't perfect by any means, but Esau was just not fit for what God had in store and to be the ancestor of the Israelites, of the people of God. Well, in Exodus 32, we learn that Aaron was not cut out to do what Moses' role was going to be. He was perfect, it seems, for the role that he chose him to do as the mouthpiece. He did that well. But in Exodus 32, we see what happened when Moses was not around. And when Aaron was put in Moses' place, so to speak. And I talked this morning, I think I mentioned how chapters, think of in terms of chapters, Exodus 32 should be one of those chapters. Exodus 32 is the golden calf chapter. So you may not have any clue what happened in Exodus 12 through the end of the book, but 32, that's that chapter where the golden calf appears, or that's what Aaron said anyway, just appeared. Yeah. Dean, do you have something? Peer pressure. Yeah. Yep. Yep. He caved. J.E., did you have something, or were you just scratching or something? Okay, just making sure. Your hand was half up, so didn't want to ignore you. Moses, well, we know that Moses was, taken in and, yeah, yep. I probably misspoke if I mentioned I used the analogy of Big Brother, but, yeah. Yeah, we don't really see Aaron in that picture. We see Miriam. Aaron, we don't really know what was going on with Aaron. So it's a little, it's just the nature of details that are not given. So Miriam, Aaron being older than Moses, how exactly did that play into the whole, apparently the danger just within that 3 years between Aaron and Moses must have been a little bit different, because otherwise they would have done that with Aaron too, hidden him and protected him, but maybe it wasn't so much of a threat and danger when Aaron was born.
Surrogate mother, even though he was placed in Pharaoh's house. When you look at the personalities, talkers are usually people. In other words, they don't just talk to themselves, they talk to everybody around them.
Yeah.
Their talk, that was Aaron. Moses was a doer. I mean, when he saw his people, he had a strong identity with the Hebrews. Had to have come from his mother, obviously, so he taught Aaron too. Moses killed the guy who was hurting a Hebrew. So Moses didn't do much talking, he did a lot of moving.
Yeah.
So you can see, or at gifts that he had given each of them. But like with a lot of gifts, sometimes we accept the gift and forget the giver.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, when Moses was taken in, providentially, God oversaw that whole situation, and Moses was still raised by his mother. We just don't know how long of a period necessarily. It doesn't work in years. It's not said this many years Moses was with his mother, and then he went to live with So we don't know exactly how long Aaron would have been with Moses under the same roof before Moses was sent back over to be with the Pharaoh. And we don't know how quickly Moses started to come back around and sort of start looking into and spending time with the Hebrews again. We just know that it was later in his life when he finally made the decision. And like Joe said, he didn't do a whole lot of talking necessarily. And, that wasn't necessarily to his advantage because he may have acted a little too quickly, but he didn't need a crowd around him and gather around. Let me tell you about some stuff. He just he saw this conflict and he went and settled it. Maybe not in the best way, obviously, in some instances, but there's a lot we don't know about Moses and Aaron's relationship as siblings before Exodus 4, but we'll just have to leave it to our imaginations or not. Yep.
Well, it's clear that Moses, too, he was trained under the Egyptians,
Mm-hmm.
and he was going to be a ruler. So we know that by him, he was going to have authority. So he saw something that was happening to one of his relatives. So by him being in authority, he could do something.
Yeah. Whether he was going to be a ruler of whatever kind or not, he was in the extremely high class, very much upper class. And even in our country, within the last, the whole class, the thick, distinct lines between classes is much less drastic than it used to be, even not that long ago, relatively speaking, in our country. So in history, it's always been there. That line has been there, and Aaron wouldn't have been. Moses would have been in that very high upper class, royal class even. Aaron didn't have any of that, so that may have helped their relationship. The swapping. Even though Aaron was older, Moses was a somebody. Probably not a somebody that Aaron had any care about, or any other Hebrew. I don't care if you're in Egypt, if anything, that may be bad in their eyes, but God knew what he was doing when he picked Aaron to do what Aaron was going to do. But then when we get to chapter 32 of Exodus, Moses goes up to the mountaintop to speak with God, or vice versa. God is going to speak to him to give him the law, and everybody else was only allowed to go up so much, to a certain point. And of course God said, don't let anybody come near. That he was teaching them a lesson in that too. Don't come near, don't even touch the foot of the mountain, even if an animal does, Well, by the time chapter 32 comes along, Moses had been up there for over a month. And the people, remember, Moses didn't grow up with them. They didn't know that they basically just met Moses. Now, Aaron, we're talking about a huge number of people, so we don't know how many of them Aaron would have been acquainted with personally. But Moses especially, he's gone. So they sort of bum rush Aaron, make us gods who shall go before us. Because this Moses, who brought us up the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, see, that's what he was to them. He wasn't their brother. He wasn't their leader. He's the man that brought us up out of Egypt, which wasn't even accurate necessarily in itself. We don't know what's happened to him. Now, Aaron had a chance here to stand and say, no. what are you talking? Are you crazy? We're not doing that. Just wait a little longer. Jehovah knows what He's doing. He'll be back, I promise you. But this is where we see Aaron's weakness. We don't see any resistance. What Aaron said, and that's not to say that there wasn't any resistance at all, but as far as the record is concerned, Aaron went along with it. Moses would not have done that, okay? Say all the good we can say about Aaron and all the weak points of Moses' character, I think we all would agree Moses would not have gone for that, not for a second. But Aaron was not of the same moral, maybe, or spiritual strength, or maybe just a social strength, like we said, peer pressure. He caved. So all of his spiritual strengths crumbled because of the people pressuring him. He was not able to stand up to that, and he didn't just make it, he came up with the way for them to make it. Okay, here we go. Give me all we'll melt the things that we can melt, and we'll form this thing. And God said, and by the way, let's give Aaron a little bit of credit. I've pointed out before that the people, what they really wanted to do was they wanted an image of God, something tangible to look at. They weren't trying to worship that thing that they just made. They were just wanting an image, a tangible object, because there's the tangible object between them and Jehovah is now gone. It used to be Moses. They didn't remember in Egypt was that one of those 450-year periods of God not speaking to them. These people did not grow up knowing Jehovah. They have now met Jehovah through Moses, and now Moses is gone. So they just wanted an object that they thought, and they got this from Egypt, by the way. They got this whole concept from Egypt. They worship calves over there, cattle. But Aaron did it, and he tried to direct them in the right way. It says immediately in verse 5 that he built an altar before it and made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to Jehovah." Even though he said, "These are your gods, O Israel," he really messed up there. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt? They said that rather, but then he tried to get them. He tried to, okay, wait a minute, let's proclaim a feast to Jehovah. But still, he did this. And Moses really let him have it. And he made all kinds of excuses. But it just didn't work. So he was human. And we talk about Peter and how his shortcomings make us even relate to him even more. Aaron, it's no different with Aaron. How many times have you ever caved before peer pressure? You probably can't count. And don't even think about saying that you never have. Joe, did you want to say something? You may have been the one that made somebody cave to peer pressure. Everybody at some point will at least feel the effect of peer pressure and can understand. Even if you overcame, you understand how powerful it can be. And not everybody is as strong in the face of human pressure to not cave and give in, even if they'll immediately regret it. Aaron was human. And he slipped. Yeah.
Well, what I was thinking of, gave that command, was, according to this Bible, the scripture, a pillar of fire at night and a cloud, they knew that there was a God that was leading them, that told them where. So it's kind of what we do today. They decided to make a God out of what they thought they knew, instead of realizing that God is who He is, and He will reveal Himself the way He wants to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we all do in religion. We want to worship the way we know there's a God, but let's just do it the way we like it. Instead of saying, no, he's the one in charge.
Yeah.
He's the one who goes before you. And don't follow anything else.
Yep. And growing in its understanding of God's operation that gives us peace and comfort. Just like in their case, you think it's kind of like a little kid, a child, a baby. As they grow up, they get a better understanding. So to a baby, if they don't see their mom or dad, they're not there. You know? You could round a corner into the next room, and that baby might panic and be hysterical because they're all alone. As they get a little older, they understand, well, they're not gone. They're just there. They're right there. Or, and if you need them, that's where they're going to be. They're in the kitchen or they're in another room. And then as they get older and older, that kind of understanding just grows and grows and grows to the point where, they can sleep in a different room, and hopefully they were anyway, but, they moved to a different house even, and, mom and dad are there. This is normal. With God, we understand that He doesn't operate in direct miracles and, zapping things here and zapping things there. Aaron would have known, we would think by this point, that God's in control. All of them should have known that. And yes, it's strange. It may be a little, we didn't expect 40 days. I mean, this is a long time for Him to be up there. And like you mentioned, leading them through the wilderness, with the fire and the cloud. But Aaron could have stood a little bit more firm and said, just be patient. Everything is fine. But that pressure, even if he and himself knew it, he didn't seem to be too worried about Moses being gone. We don't get that impression, but he caved under the peer pressure. There's another moment of weakness for Aaron very quickly. It's in Numbers 12. And this one may even be a little bit more damning than the other, because maybe this is peer pressure again. It may be this pattern we see. This was Aaron's weakness, was peer pressure. Because big sister, now, yeah, Moses didn't grow up his whole life in the household of their parents. But big sister, it seems, and he did. So she may have been whooping up on him every day for their whole childhood, for all we know. But at any rate, in Numbers 12, she seems, based on the punishment, not because God is sexist, but because she seemed to be the leader in this, she dragged Aaron into rebelling against Moses. And they spoke against Moses and immediately received quite the rebuke and punishment. Has Jehovah indeed spoken only through Moses? Has He not spoken through us also? Kind of makes us wish we had a little bit more info about. Yeah, but, well, it's not a valid question, though, because they're rebelling. They're saying, why should we? That question means, why should we listen to Moses? Yeah, they weren't asking. This was a rhetorical thing justifying not listening to Moses. Has God only spoken to Moses? Why should I have to listen to Moses? Has He not spoken to me too? So why are we walking around here listening to Moses? Moses, Moses, Moses. And they were punished, especially Miriam, which makes it very clear that she was the main actor in this. And that would mean Aaron seems to have been influenced into it, just like he was influenced into the golden calf. So, yeah, we can relate to that. Peer pressure again. And by the way, verse 1 tells us what they were mad about. Yeah. Yeah, at the very least.
It's like a parent giving in to their child, like, okay, just
Sometimes you do it, you mean. Yeah, they were really mad about the woman he married. You see, that it's a very interesting detail, a very important detail. But what they brought up was nothing to do with that. Yeah, they apparently Miriam didn't like her sister-in-law too much. Anybody here not like your sister-in-law? You want to raise your hand? Marilyn, put your hand down, okay? Now, that'd be the other way around. I doubt any of Wayne's sisters have that problem, not liking their sister-in-laws, either one of them. She didn't like hers, apparently, and Aaron wasn't crazy about her either. But, you see, Miriam pulled Aaron into this total irrelevant rebellion against Moses. They were just getting tired of Moses. And so, again, we see that weakness. But Aaron was a sincere, it seems, God-seeking, God-serving man. That's why, one of his legacy statements in Leviticus is that what we looked at the beginning. He did all the things that Jehovah commanded by Moses, not perfectly, but as a rule, just like David. David was a man after God's own heart, but boy, he messed up a lot, and big time. But as a rule, God even said, I need someone who will follow my rules and my statutes and my commandments as David did. So Aaron was a God-seeking and God-serving man. Mm-hmm.
It's in this same chapter that Moses is referred to as meek. And see, my understanding of the definition of meek was power under control, which is the way Moses exhibited it by killing off the Egyptian that was hurting the Hebrew. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking meekness means they're a pushover.
Yeah.
And if Miriam and Aaron thought, he's not going to do anything about it, we'll just, that they could push Moses out of the way.
Yeah.
It was their mistake, obviously.
Yeah. And
I think that's why they misunderstood his meekness.
really had nothing to do with Moses.
No.
That's what Moses said. Whenever they did that kind of thing, not just them, but anybody, he was quick to say, look, you're really playing with fire here because this is not about me. Your murmuring is against Jehovah, and he knows it. He hears your murmuring, and who am I? I'm nobody, he says, and even he and Aaron both. We're nobody. So sometimes, usually, Aaron was lumped with Moses. Their murmuring was against Moses and Aaron. But so at the very least, you would hope for Moses' sake that Miriam and Aaron would be with him. But then on that occasion in Numbers 12, we saw even that got messed up. But we see that Aaron, right along with Moses, mourned when the people started acting up. They were distraught about it. They were very distressed, fell on their faces, interceded for the people when necessary. That we also can't forget, we're out of time, but Aaron was one of the ones that helped Moses. He held him up, and that is just one of my favorite pictures, snapshots of anything, is that picture of Moses being weak, and because, yes, that literally actually happened, but also we can see that throughout his whole ministry. Aaron was right there with Moses. He had to deal with all of it, the same stuff, complaining, and yes, he got sucked into it a couple times, but most of the time he was having to deal with it on the other side, the same side Moses was on. But even though he fell with Moses in that water scandal, which, by the way, wasn't really so much peer pressure on Moses' part like it was with Aaron with the other stuff, but just fed up. He wasn't giving in to the people. He was fed up with the people, and he hit that rock and got attitude with them and said, you want water? I'll give you water, kabong, and Aaron was in that too. So he didn't get to enter the promised land the same way that Moses didn't get to. But we do read that Aaron died a faithful man of God. He did not die a perfect, sinless man of God, but he did die a faithful man of God. And that alone is something we can learn so much from. He went up at the command of Jehovah and died there. Go up there, Aaron, and go die. What a command, you know. But there he goes. He took his punishment and submitted to God's will. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, they died. They may not have lived every moment together, but they were, you know, raised in the same roof. For several years they were together, and then they even died together. Right? I mean, not literally right together, but apart. They were together. We won't even get into all that. But so much we can learn from Aaron's strengths as well as his weaknesses. But peer pressure, that is a subject that it cannot be underestimated because it is such a powerful thing. Yes, sir. Yeah, just men. Yeah. I can't even imagine. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. And like I said, we pity Moses, but Aaron was right there with him. I mean, Aaron was with him through it all. And yeah, he was not perfect. But here's like we said from the beginning, coming around. What can we learn from Aaron's mistakes, from his weakness? Peer pressure. Don't fall into that. Whenever we know what is right, we should not let anybody be able to coax us or persuade us to do otherwise. No matter what caring what people think does matter sometimes. Even Paul said, you know, we ought to make it our aim, you know, to do what's honorable, not just in the sight of God, but also in the sight of men. We shouldn't totally ignore what something might look like, because we should take that into consideration. But we shouldn't care what people think so much that we're going to let them convince us to do something we know is wrong. No matter what might happen. They won't like us anymore. They won't be our friend anymore. They'll make fun of us. I'll be an outcast. So be it. That is just a compliment in that case. When somebody knows that you're not like everybody else in that sense, that's a compliment. And it's a teaching example, a teaching tool. People recognize that, and they may make fun of you for it, like at the workplace or, you know, at the construction site or whatever, and they know that you don't take part in their, you know, what kind of talking they do and the smoke breaks and all this stuff. That's just a compliment. But you don't have to shun them altogether, but don't give in to the peer pressure of getting sucked into that kind of thing. It's not just a high school problem. It may be stronger then, but it never stops. Peer pressure always will exist. And, you know, the internet and social media and stuff may make it even worse. Indirect peer pressure is something we could probably get into as well, where people are not in your face like it was with Aaron, but just the pressure of conforming to the things that people do. Social media and otherwise creates a lot of problems. But know what God's will is, conform to that, and then say no compromise. Peer pressure won't be an issue. So next week, Lord willing, we'll look at Abednego. Unless you really want to do the draw a name out of a hat thing, like I said, I'm okay with that. I'll just have to make a list of all the names. But Abednego, and we will throw in Shadrach and Meshach with him because it wouldn't make much sense. No pun intended, by the way, throwing them in. You'll get it. I didn't even get it. It just came out. But yeah, we will look at them next week.